Support for I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere comes from MX Publishing, with the largest catalog of new Sherlock Holmes books in the world. New novels, biographies, graphic novels, and short story collections about Sherlock Holmes. Find them at mxpublishing.com.
And listeners like you who support us on Patreon or Substack, sign up for exclusive benefits at patreon.com/ihearofsherlock or ihearofsherlock.substack.com.
I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, episode 307, The Evolution of 221 Beacon.
I hear of Sherlock everywhere since you became astronomer.
In a world where it's always 1895, it's I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, a podcast for devotees of Mr. Sherlock Holmes, the world's first unofficial consulting detective.
I've heard of you before. You're Holmes the meddler, Holmes the busybody, Holmes the Scotland Yard Jack in office.
The game's afoot as we interview authors, editors, creators, and other prominent Sherlockians on various aspects of the great detective in popular culture.
As we go to press, sensational developments have been reported.
So join your hosts, Scott Monty and Bert Wolder, as they talk about what's new in the world of Sherlock Holmes.
You couldn't have come at a better time!
I'm Bill Curtis. This is I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere. Now, here are your hosts, Scott Monty and Bert Wolder.
Well, hello and welcome to I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, the first podcast for Sherlock Holmes devotees where it's always 1895. I'm Scott Monty.
And I'm Bert Wolder. How about that?
You are the fully evolved Bert Wolder.
I am. Yeah.
That's the kind we like.
Completely evolved, totally evolutionary.
You're walking upright. I'm glad to see it.
Yeah, much of the time. Yeah.
Except after certain Sherlockian events, then we tend to be crawling home.
Yes.
Well, we have a lovely show ahead for you today. We're going to be talking about, some of the events that you may be getting ready for this spring. There's always certain Sherlockian events happening in the springtime, and we're just going to remind you of what some of those are. One of those, of course, is a big one. It's 221 Beacon happening on April 11th, the weekend of April 11th in Atlanta, Georgia, now in its 12th year. We have with us Johanna Draper Carlson, who is one of the lead volunteers in helping to make that a reality. She's going to talk with us about her history with cons, with 221 Beacon, what to expect this year, and what to expect beyond, if anything. So stay tuned. You won't want to miss that interview. We should remind you at this point that if you'd like to support I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, you can do that on Substack or on Patreon. A couple of different platforms. Each has a different way of dealing with paid subscriptions, etc. But we encourage you to check those out. We have those available in the show notes, or you can go directly to ihearofsherlock.substack.com or patreon.com/ihearofsherlock. Almost blanked on that one for a minute. For as little as $1 a month, you can support us here at I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere. And of course, we encourage you to tell other people about us. That is one of the best ways that people have come to know and love I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere is through the word of mouth. So share the show on whatever platform you happen to be supporting or listening to us on, and get other Sherlock Holmes fans involved. And let us know what you think about us at comment@ihearofsherlock.com. We're always glad to hear from you. Since you are a listener of I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, we can be fairly certain that you enjoy audio. And if you enjoy audio as it relates to Sherlock Holmes, then guess what? You are in luck. Our friends at MX Publishing have over 390 books that are available on Audible as part of the MX Publishing platform. And we here at I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere have a code to share with you that you can claim for 5 free audiobooks. All you have to do is follow the link in the show notes under our sponsorship section. Click on that link, and it'll take you to a form that you can fill out to claim your 5 titles. You can look through the full list of Audible titles from MX Publishing so you can see what you are getting. There are titles there like The Selected Cases of Dr. Watson by Martin Daly, narrated by Kevin Green. The Further Memoirs of Sherlock Holmes by Caden Cooper Miles, narrated by Luke Barton, who you may remember appeared here on an episode of I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere. And The Recollections of Sherlock Holmes by Arthur Hall, narrated by Michael Langan. Again, there are over 390 titles to choose from. Put in the 5 that you like in that form, and you will get an email describing what you need to do to claim your free codes. We hope you appreciate this free offer from MX Publishing, our longtime sponsor and friend of the program. Be sure to visit their entire website at mxpublishing.com. Johanna Draper Carlson has been reviewing comics for over 25 years and running Comics Worth Reading since 1999. She has a Master of Arts degree in popular culture with focus areas on online fandom and the portrayal of hackers in popular culture. Her credits are numerous, including as a contributor to the Guide to United States Popular Culture, graphic novel reviewer for Good Comics for Kids, a school library journal blog since 2017, a graphic novel and manga reviewer for Publishers Weekly from 2003 to 2014, a moderator for Doctor Who and Theology, a monthly discussion group from 2015 to the present, and co-host of the Manga Out Loud podcast from 2010 to 2012. And she just founded the Sherlock Holmes in Comics site at sherlockcomics.com. Johanna Draper Carlson, welcome back to I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere.
Thank you. It is always great to talk with y'all.
Well, it is nice for you to be here with us once again. Now, you were here in, I want to say it was season 16, I think it was. Episode, do you remember your number?
Oh, gosh, no. I remember it was about sherlockcomics.com, which is now like 4 years old. It's
3 years ago.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm glad you're back. Yeah. So we've got an interesting show lined up this time, an interesting episode, talking with you about the evolution of 221 BCon. Now, Crystal Knoll and Heather Holloway were with us, I think, on episode 163 to talk about 221 BCon, which, if folks aren't aware of that, I don't know how you can be at this point. Go back and listen to that episode and get a sense for it. But, Johanna, talk with us about where 221 BCon is now, because I know we've got an upcoming event. What year are we in? What's the significance?
Well, so the coming show this year, it's in about a month. It's the weekend of April 11th. It's the 12th year of the show. Certainly the show spun out of fandom for BBC Sherlock, the TV show. So the audience has changed a lot over the years. It's the only Sherlockian event of its kind, and that's why I love it so much. It's very media-friendly, queer-friendly, diverse. It's basically a group of Sherlockians take over a hotel in Atlanta, Georgia for a weekend, and it's wonderful because there's a ton of fan-created programming. Over half of it is Sherlockian, and that ranges from the original canon literary to media versions. Obviously, Watson is a big topic this year because of the new CBS show. But there are also other panels on other fandoms people are interested in. Past years have had Good Omens or Our Flag Means Death or Doctor Who. There are panels on creation in terms of cosplay or writing or art. So it's a really nice blend, and it's very fan driven. I've been going to conventions of various kinds for over 20 years now, mainly in the comic book world. But this one is very much, as I said, fan driven because fans volunteer. They put in ideas for panels they want to talk about, and then they volunteer for other people's panels. So we've got some people doing presentations. I'm doing one on how everything we know about Mycroft Holmes is a lie, because Mycroft is one of my favorites. But then you also have people doing roundtables and discussions and sharing experiences. It's just, there's, like I said, there's nothing else like it in the Sherlockian world, and that's why so many people love it.
How do you go, Johanna? How do you go about organizing and from an editorial standpoint, the planning? I mean, it's with all those things in flux and so much change.
Well, speaking of change, it was announced at last year's show that this year would be the final one. And I immediately went through the 5 stages of grief that weekend. Denial, bargaining. I went up to Heather and Crystal and said, do you need money? Can I give you money? Would that keep it going? And as a result, I wound up helping them out. I'm a project manager in the day world. And so I help them get some organization going, help them delegate some work. Spending 12 years of your life getting this going is a lot of investment and a lot of time and energy. And it's certainly understandable that they maybe want to move on and do something else or just get some of that time and back. So this year they've let me help them out. I've seen a good deal of how the organization's going behind the scenes. I'm not the only one. There's another Heather who's been handling social media, and there's still a great group of people that help volunteering and staffing and all that. So I don't want to make it sound like I came riding in or anything. But I love the show so much I wanted to do what I could to help. So to get back to your question about the organization, it's just a matter of hitting certain deadlines. At this point, there's a very dedicated crew that come every year. It's kind of like a reunion of that sort, of fellow fans and friends, people who've made friends during this weekend, people who maybe can use this weekend to try new things. But there's a period of time where, as I said, people put in ideas for panels. There's some that tend to show up every year. There's certain segments of fandom that always want to talk about their things, like Molly Hooper, for example, from the BBC show. And then we take that list and see, do these all sound good? One that I'm particularly interested in this year is when good art is made by bad people. Which is going to be a way of talking about what happens when there's sort of a Me Too situation with the creator of a favorite fandom. So there's all kinds of topics. And then we put out, once we have that list sort of pared down, as we said, people can volunteer to be on them. If there are panels that nobody volunteers for, then they kind of get cut. And then there are several tracks of programming that are put on a staggered schedule. There's several panel rooms going at any given time. So sometimes the challenge is, wow, I want to see both these things, but I have to pick one. So it's just, keeping on top of it. And I think we have about 60 some panels on the list this year. We are, because it was going to be the final year, there is a sort of cut down space at the hotel. So there aren't as many as there would normally be. But the panels run generally from 5 p.m. Friday to generally about 2 p.m. Sunday, because Sunday there's always Ashley Polishek and Curtis Armstrong always do a panel together that's really great, whatever subject they pick. And then there's what they call the last bow panel, where everybody comes together who's still there on Sunday afternoon and talks about, here's what we liked, thank you for doing this, here's some suggestions we have. Like last year, they suggested they open up the hotel reservations for the next year immediately, so they went and talked to the hotel and did that. So it's a feedback, and how can we help continue to make the show better.
That's really great. that kind of real time feedback. You don't see that very often. Usually, it's people go away, or they're sent a survey, and it's a little removed from the experience. So
Yeah. No, well, this is
emotions
always.
run hot, but you also get immediate feedback.
Well, usually it's a little bit of a love fest because people enjoy being there so much that they just say, I want to appreciate the volunteers who are helping do registration, or I wanted to appreciate the person who helped me do this, or so and so had a great costume or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's a really great way to sort of wrap it up in sort of a joint encounter session.
Yeah. So, how many people typically attend 221 Beacon, and have you seen growth over the years?
Well, as I said, it's not what it was during sort of the peak of Sherlock fandom. One of the things the show's been coping with is during that peak, they didn't have to do a lot of outreach because people would just search for and find them. So now, as the show's matured, there's a little bit more of how do we make sure that the people that will find this great know about it. For instance, at the New York Sherlockian birthday weekend, we had some bookmarks. And Belanger Books is our first show sponsor. We added sponsors this year, and they kindly stepped up and agreed to sponsor. The Ken Ludwig Group is our other sponsor, of the playwright. But Belanger Books had at their table some giveaway bookmarks. But as I was saying, it's a different kind of event from sort of some of the more traditional Scion-based Sherlockian events. So I want to make sure that the right people are finding it. And if people are not going to be comfortable, my shorthand version was, if you don't want to be somewhere where people have pronoun buttons, this is not the show for you. And that's okay. It's a matter of finding the right mix between the event and the attendees. But to answer your question, we had about 300 guests last year. And the room block closes March 19th, as we record this on March 14th. But I think most of it's sold out already. And again, we had a few. We cut back a little bit because it was going to be a slightly smaller show. But I think it's all sold out. I mean, I think there's still rooms at the hotel. You may not be able to get within the show discount block.
Okay. So just to be clear, if people still want to register to attend or register to stay there are still rooms available in the hotel.
Yes, but they may not be at the discount rate.
Got it.
So, I mean, it's the Marriott Atlanta Airport Hotel. So it's really easy to get to. Everything goes to Atlanta. So a lot of people never leave the hotel, but there are other things to do in Atlanta, including a really cool puppetry museum that has Muppets in it and a really great aquarium. And for some reason, some people are fascinated by the fact that there are Waffle Houses.
Okay. Well, and there is a Waffle House Scion Society, basically.
Yes, and I think that's where they formed. The Waffleiers. Yes. So, it's whatever. It's a great way to meet up with people and learn about new things. I'm always, I find it interesting seeing what the panels are for, to be like, oh, this is an up and coming fandom I was not aware of. So you can see but then again, there's always Sherlock too. So,
Johanna, how do you reach out to people who are not in the orbit of all of this now? How do you get because interestingly enough, this is sort of a recurring theme among Sherlockian societies. The membership comes and goes. And I always am surprised by finding the number of avid people who have a real interest in this stuff, even today. And when you tell them about it, they're absolutely, they had just no idea there were organizations. You would think it would be hard to hide. But there are a lot of people you come across who say, gee, I never heard of that. Yeah. That sounds interesting.
There are a lot of events these days and a lot of shows and conventions and things. So yes, that was one of the challenges. Normally, when I've helped with promotion for other things in the past, it's a matter of, if you like this, you'll like that. So, I'm trying to promote that. Let's find the people that like this. Well, as I said, this is kind of unique in its approach. So a lot of the traditional Sherlockian media and outreach is not necessarily the perfect match. I did write an article for Sherlock Holmes magazine recently about international visitors coming to 221B because that magazine is based out of England. And I happen to know a couple that had come and had a great time. Of course, I did that right before travel to the U.S. became potentially dangerous for some of the audience. So that's kind of an unfortunate situation. Atlanta is a big convention town, especially in media. So I know that they've done outreach at various other local conventions, Dragon Con, that kind of thing. But yeah, getting the word out is tricky. There's a lot of word of mouth in this case. I have friends who I know would love this. Come on. We got someone to come from Italy last year just because we were talking it up, and she had a fabulous time and is planning to come back this year, I think. But that is always a challenge to make sure people hear about it, especially if you're doing it without a lot of advertising budget or any advertising budget, actually.
Yeah. Always a challenge.
So, have you seen the fan? Well, I know the answer to this, but I'm curious what your perspective is on how the fandom has changed or the fandoms have changed. I mean,
that's a tricky
in, what's
question.
out, what's is it more cosplay, less cosplay? Is it?
Well, so it's fractured, but that's not a bad thing. Instead of everybody being into BBC Sherlock, we have a panel that's going to be about Sherlock on stage. So that's got some historical aspects to it, a particularly ephemeral form, unfortunately, because, several years ago that not a lot of those were recorded. One of the big drivers right now is Sherlock & Co., the podcast / audio drama. And in fact, here's a piece of, I'm going to check real quick to make sure that I can. Okay. Here's a scoop for you. We are trying this year an AV hookup. Normally it's just basically live come to the show and do a presentation, but we are trying a live AV hookup with one of the creators of Sherlock & Co. as a sort of remote guest.
They have been remarkably dialed into the fandom.
Yeah.
Very responsive. I know we talked with Joel back on episode 275, and we talked with Harry, who plays Sherlock, on episode 300.
That was great.
And he really was. And to us, that show is like an audio version of the BBC Sherlock. And to your audience at 221 Beacon, it would seem almost like a natural extension to go from that televised version of a modern Sherlock Holmes to an audio version that still has years of runway in front of it.
Yep. And a lot of people, someone last year was cosplaying as John Watson and actually had the same kind of recorder and microphone that he mentioned in the show. It was amazingly well done. They were carrying that and a takeaway coffee cup that said "Jonk" on it. So it was a great cosplay. We actually have two panels set up for that. We have one with the AV that we're crossing our fingers it works. It is an experiment, so I hope people will be generous to us. And then we're also doing a discussion in terms of the fans, how, who like it and what they like about it and all that kind of thing. I'm trying to think what other fandoms we are promoting, or we do have panels on this year. As I said, Watson is popular.
Is Watson outside the U.S. at this point, or is it just in the States?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think it's the U.S. We're having one on the 50th anniversary of Jaws, which was surprisingly popular. We are talking to Brian Belanger about how to succeed as a Sherlockian publisher. Since he's one of our sponsors, we wanted to talk to him about. I think they're having their 10th anniversary this year, so that's good timing for that. And our other guest, one of our other guests is Helen Greetham, who has created the Beekeeper's Picnic video game. I don't know if you're familiar with this. It's releasing this month. There was a very successful Kickstarter about it, but it's basically cozy or cottagecore. It's basically, you are Sherlock Holmes. You are trying to give Watson a nice picnic, and people keep trying to get you to solve cases for them. And you're like, I just need to get him some food so we can go sit by the shore in Sussex and have a picnic. But it's got audio acting, and it's adorable. It's just wonderful. But she's coming in from England actually to talk about what what inspired this game? What are some of the Easter eggs? I don't want to spoil those for you, but there's some hilarious ones. So that's going to be exciting. But there's all these aspects of what people are doing with the characters. One of my friends is doing a panel called "Can You Do That and Live?" They're both doctors. There are two people on the panel are both doctors, and it's for people who want to write medical scenes into fic. And so here's some sort of things they've seen over the years in terms of, yes, this is researched, and no, don't do that. So that ought to be amusing. And then there's also one on autism and neurodiversity in Sherlock Holmes. The character is often seen by a number of people as on the spectrum. And one on Agatha All Along, the Marvel show. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a whole range of topics, and that's just some of them.
That is fascinating. And the idea that they're not all like bored down into the hole that we've dug for Sherlock Holmes, but are adjacent and related. And, every Sherlockian that we know has other interests, and they find ways to bring them into, their writing or their presentations or whatnot. So it's fascinating to see that it's coming to life that way at 221 Beacon.
Well, but I want to be clear. There's also room for. I mean, we have a panel on BSI and ASH and other societies. It's not all just sort of you have to love the media version. I mean, my panel on Mycroft comes from the Arthur Conan Doyle canon in terms of what John Watson tells us versus what we see about the character.
Well, and I wanted to ask you about that. Everything we know about Mycroft Holmes is a lie. What's the premise there? I mean,
the premise is
why wouldn't Watson come clean?
That John Watson is not a reliable narrator when it comes to the big brother of Sherlock Holmes. It comes from, he tells us things like, oh, he never leaves his tracks, and then we immediately see him at 221B. It's he can't get his eye color straight. He can't. They're gray, but they're light gray, and then they're steel gray. It's we see him twice, and yet there's these immense contradictions in the character. So this is actually an idea that I have been telling Dan Andriaco I want to write for the Baker Street Journal for forever. So I figured if I had to do a presentation, I might actually start.
That's great. Well, it sounds like a lot of fun, if anything.
Now, how is it, Johanna, you don't know that the converse of this is true, that Watson is a very reliable narrator, but it's Mycroft who is actually shape-shifting?
Well, you see, I actually wrote a piece for a book once where there was a shapeshifter, but it wasn't Mycroft, it was Grimsby Roylott, and that's why you have all those animals at his place that don't belong there. He's actually turning into the cheetah and the baboon and the snake. So
I like that.
That was for Brad and Rob's Monstrum Opus.
Where
you had to put a monster in Sherlock Holmes,
right.
and
I think that was the same edition where Ray Betzner had who was it? Little Edward Rewcastle.
Yeah.
As werewolf.
As a werewolf.
Yes. The werewolf, the dog, yes. So but you can be playful and still be, interested in traditional Sherlock Holmes canon. Yes. Which is an approach I have to it. It ought to be fun if nothing else. So the other presentation I'm giving is Brother Mine, How You've Changed, a comparison of the Holmes brothers across time and visual media. But I'm giving that in Dayton first. And I mentioned that, and people were like, I can't go to Dayton, but I want to see it. I'm like, okay, I'll give it again at 221B.
Oh, good.
So
I look forward to that.
Yeah.
Well, there's a double plug, right? For all of you for all of you Sherlockian travelers out there who happen to be doing it all, like Johanna, if you're going to be in Dayton next weekend, that's a great plug. And if you're going to be in Atlanta in mid-April, that's a plug as well.
Well, I didn't even mention the fun of the social events, because there is a geek prom where the theme is heavenly bodies, like the Met Gala. And we also have a karaoke night. So,
wow.
Come hang out with your fellow Sherlockians. And of course, there's always the bar.
But that goes without saying.
Yeah.
So The geek prom. This is something that happens every year.
There's usually a dance. Yeah. Yeah.
What are some of the standout costumes or outfits that you've seen over the years?
Well, I don't think there was a theme last year, although I did end up teaching some people how to ballroom dance for some reason. I was briefly a ballroom dance TA in college. So
oh my goodness.
They set up this thing, and I don't know if the instructor didn't show or what was going on, but I was like, okay, here's a box step. So that was fun. It's people bringing all of themselves to this and all their unique talents and interests, as you said. So yeah, or and then there's always the thing about it being in the same location is that you can always just wander through and see somebody. The first year I went, I was there kind of early. There were not a lot of people around. There was someone sitting by themselves. I could tell they were one of us, because it is an airport hotel in Atlanta, so you occasionally get the Delta, costume. Sorry, not costume. Outfitted flight crew
uniforms,
wandering through.
yeah.
Uniforms, yes, not costumes. But anyway, so this person was sitting by themselves, and so I went over and said, "Do you mind if I sit with you? This is my first time. Can we talk a little bit?" And she started telling me how she was an artist, and it turns out that the phone case I had on my phone, she had drawn the art for. So that's the kind of place
Wow.
It is, where you're like, "Oh my gosh, you're so and so. I love your work. I read your fic. Yeah." Because
That's
the thing that I love about this aspect of fandom is that after spending so long in comic books, where it's very, heavily male, it's very, can you answer this trivia question driven? Do you know where the first appearance of so-and-so, which issue it was? To come into this fandom when I did, and specifically the media fandom, it was immediately encouraged to be creative. It was like, oh, you have that idea. Why don't you write that up? Oh, I couldn't write fic. Oh, yeah, you could. It's fine. I'll help you. I'll beta for you. And it's just encouraging to bring your visions and bring your interpretations, and let's talk about them, and let's create more out of it. AO3 and the Association for Transformative Works.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and that kind of brings to mind, you mentioned before 20 years worth of con attendance. From your own interests, obviously.
Well, and
Comic-Con,
volunteering. Yeah.
And Comic-Con looms big in that. But of all of the cons that you've gone to over the years, how many are more of that corporate Comic-Con type, and how many are like fandom driven? And what are the differences that you've seen?
Big. Yeah. No, I basically went to, there are what I consider three types of comic book conventions. There's your super huge San Diego, New York, C2E2 in Chicago, that are very much, here's, comic books, but here's also video games and movie promo and people who were in a movie 20 years ago, or pro wrestlers signing autographs, and very big media driven. And huge, almost like Disney World, in that you walk around and you look at people in costume and you stand in line for a lot of things. The second type is your more regional conventions, your Heroes Con, your Baltimore Con, I think WonderCon, although I've never been there in California, in which case it's still sort of a bit more comic focused, but it is big, and there are lots of lines, and they do bring in special guests. But it's just a more comic focused version of the larger shows. And then there's the art festivals. Your Small Press Expo in Bethesda, Maryland, your Toronto Comic Arts Festival, which is more creators and publishers only. So it's more like going to a craft show, but they're making comic books. Those are my favorite. All of these are great kinds of shows as long as you know what you're getting into and you're prepared for it. The fan-driven con I had never seen before. And so my first time there, it was like, wow, this is really kind of interesting. This is just people talking about what they like. The closest one I know of, here in Madison, Wisconsin, they do something over Memorial Day called WizCon, which is a feminist science fiction convention, but it's very much similar in terms of, I want to talk about this. Does anybody else want to talk about this? Great, let's get a room and have a panel. It's a very different atmosphere, but it's also very welcoming. Did that answer your question?
You answered my question and more. Which, that's what I love.
Yeah.
It's just fascinating to me because, as an observer from the outside, I haven't gone to any cons like this. Haven't had the chance yet to go to 221 BCon. So I was just curious as to how it all work together. And you mentioned earlier in the show that last year the announcement was made that this 12th show, might be the last. And you've talked about so many people volunteering here, but if people want to see this continue, how do they get their voices heard, and
Well,
what's the reception like?
yeah, there was a lot of dismay at last year's show when they announced it. I saw somebody on social media recently say, you know what, if this is the last one, I say we all just go down there at the same time next year and we'd do it ourselves. I don't think that would really work because there's a lot involved in putting a convention together.
Yeah.
But there are some plans in place to try and continue this. And I'm trying to be very careful about this because there were some people who said, well, if this is the last one, I need to make sure I go. And I don't want people to feel like it was a bait and switch, continuous going out of business sale kind of situation. It was really, the organizers.
We should sell rugs.
Yeah, the organizers have put a lot of time and money into this, and as I said, it's been a big part of their lives, and one might understand that they needed some time to step back. We're trying to work out a way that it can continue. It's not entirely set yet, so I don't want to make promises to anybody, but fingers crossed that we're hoping that it will be able to, because so many people love it. And I mean, I was telling them, given where I was over the past few years and everything that was going on in my personal life, this show literally saved my life. It's one of the things that finding this and finding fandom and finding the wonderful people, I have made some best friends out of people I've met because of this, that it's really important to me to try and find a way to continue. And that's why I pitched in this year to try and help take some of the load off of them. And I told them, I'd love to help. I have these skills. Even if it's still the last one, at least maybe I made it easier for you. Maybe you had some more fun this time so you can leave on a high note. But we're trying to see if we can find a way for it to continue. There are always people that want to volunteer. Con weekend is a high. And so people are like, yes. And so in order for this to happen, people have to be really realistic about what they're able to do and commit to and contribute. They'd had some problems in the past, apparently, before my time where, people had said, I'll do this, and they just either overestimated or they flaked or other things happened in their lives, which, this is kind of a volunteer event. I mean, it's run based out of an LLC, a company, because you have to, because there are taxes involved, there's insurance involved, there's contracts with the hotel. It's not just let's get a barn and put on a show kind of thing. So there's a lot of detail that goes into it and a lot of responsibility. But as I said, it's such an amazing thing. And I understand that a lot of people came forward and said, can I help? Can I donate? We were looking into sort of a personal sponsorship kind of thing, kind of like a crowdfunder, but with more benefits. But luckily, fingers crossed. Right now, it looks like the show is going to be in the black this year, so we didn't need to do that. Because there's always a thing about, I find in cases like that, sometimes the people that are most generous are the ones least able to afford it. And so, we set up the two sponsors this year, which we are thrilled that people were willing to do that to enable us to continue. That's something that I want to continue looking into if the show does continue. There are the dealers. We have a number of dealer tables where there's exciting things to buy, whether it's books or crafts or jewelry or artwork or costume pieces. It's really cool. And I should have mentioned them long before because they help fund a lot of this.
Well, I mean, ultimately, it sounds like there's a little something for everyone. At 221 BCon. And quite frankly, if you can't find some place to fit in, and maybe you shouldn't be there at all, but it sounds like it sounds like there is a little something for everyone and a lot of something for people too. I mean, boy, karaoke on Saturday night. Is it Sherlockian karaoke or is it just karaoke?
Well, I think last year Ira Matesky started us with Baker Street, so
perfect. Yes. I love it.
If I remember, I don't know. It all blurs together. It's like I think I've only gone like 2 or 3 times, but it seems like it's just an essential part of my planning every year, every April, be in Atlanta. So
yeah. Great. So if
And the
people,
cool thing about the hotel
yes,
is that they actually have their own beehives.
what?
Last year, one of the panels was going to be a tour of the beehives, and because they take the honey and use it in their recipes in their restaurant, but unfortunately, the bees had not survived the winter, so we weren't able to
Oh,
do that last year. But yeah, so it's kind of a neat connection that hey, they have bees.
so so
Sherlock
I
raised bees.
guess I guess there was no plan B. Sorry,
Well,
sorry.
they do call the volunteers the bees, so
Perfect. Well, I
yep.
hope all of the drones and worker bees down there that help out the volunteers have a great time, and we'll see what happens with 221 Beacon going into the future. But Joanna, I wish you all the best in your role as volunteer and sheep herder and whatever else it is you're doing, and
we
all of
decided
our
that my
best to go ahead.
we decided that my title was guest and sponsor coordinator this year because I love talking to
That's a
people.
big
That's the
one.
thing. I'll ask
Yeah.
anybody anything basically. And it was great fun reaching out to people and trying to come up with ideas for who would be a good match here. One of the things that unfortunately fell through is that with all the Sherlockian programming coming out, there's like 6 different things coming out with Sherlock and Co. and Watson we know of, but then there's a young Sherlock Holmes show and there's other things happening. I really wanted to reach out to some of the media services because I thought this would be a great match for them. It's the only sort of I don't want to say media focused, but media friendly Sherlock gathering for the most part. So yeah, there's more that could be done. That's why it's I'm like
Yes.
crossing my fingers that we can find a way. But I'm sorry, I stepped on your nice thank you.
No. That I'm glad you said that because, well, there is another media-friendly platform where these folks go. What's the name of it?
We've
Of
ta-
course, it's iHOSE. Yes,
Yes, we've talked about that, and I owe you
we
some
have,
book reviews for the blog
and
because that's something
and
I
we'll be
love doing
talking
for you.
more. Yeah. Well,
Yes.
you're going for our listeners. If you go to the I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere website, ihearofsherlock.com, you will be seeing more of Joanna's name in the future. There, she and I had a conversation about her role, and we're not prepared to talk about it in length right now. But let's just say we are mutual admiration society members. So that's always a good thing.
It's
Well,
true.
Joanna, we wish you all the best in Atlanta. Please give our warm wishes to Crystal and Heather
Hmm.
as their leadership winds down there. And well, it's bound to be a really remarkable gathering.
And I want to take one last chance to say there are a lot more people involved in this. There are more people behind the scenes coordinating various things. I don't want to, just because I haven't worked directly with them, give the impression that it's just the 3 of us or anything like that. There's a lot of people that make this happen, and I don't want to downplay their contributions because it really is a group effort.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that. And thanks again for being with us here on I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Joanna. One of the fascinating things to me is the themes that you see in 221 Beacon, particularly the resonance. We mentioned Sherlock and Co. And I never thought about this before, but there's a theme that's been consistent with the character of Sherlock Holmes, which is looking on Holmes as a contemporary, someone who is in the same time as the readers and the listeners and the viewers are. And that was the case up until about 1939, when 20th Century Fox was the first one to do a period film of Holmes, Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. But in the years before that, Holmes was always seen with contemporary clothing, in the streets of England in the 1920s and so on. And it just occurred to me that this now, after the BBC Sherlock, has become a continuing theme, and you see that in Sherlock and Co. And isn't that interesting how it's another aspect, I think, in which Holmes is unusual, because you can't. That certainly doesn't apply to Robin Hood and Tarzan and other popular characters. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, it is. I mean, well, when you think about it, it goes back to the original. I mean, Sherlock Holmes was a contemporary of Victorian and early Edwardian London. Conan Doyle was writing in the moment, in real time there. So we again go right back to the origins. You know, the modern interpretation of Sherlock Holmes is a parallel to what was then a modern interpretation of Sherlock Holmes. And, it's interesting. I was talking with a friend just yesterday about the Reacher series by Lee Child, and how there's a limited time frame there. And she said it's almost like Nero Wolfe, where the characters don't age, right? They kind of remain the same age forever. And they simply happen to or have to adopt the surroundings of the modern world if you want to keep them that same age, rather than keeping them bound to a particular time period. So I guess that's what's happening with Sherlock Holmes. Ah, yes, it's the learned societies, that time in the show when we talk about Sherlockian events that are going on. We know we've already kind of looked slightly into the future, but since our show comes out every 2 weeks, we thought we'd push it another 2 weeks beyond what we looked at last time. So toward the end of March, of course, we have the Dayton Conference coming up next weekend. Bert, you're going to be on hand for that one, right?
Yes, I will be. Absolutely.
Always fun. Watson's Tin Box of Ellicott City in Columbia, Maryland on March 24th. What else do we have? The Tourists International in Chicago have their dinner meeting on March 29th. And the Priory Scholars have their lunch in New York City on March 29th as well. Moving into April, of course, the Ash Dinner, Ash Wednesday, we mentioned that last time, up in Montreal, Quebec. The Bimetallic Question is having their meeting. You can check them out at bimetallicquestion.org. And again, we'll have all of the events here linked in the Sherlockian calendar in the show notes. So if you happen to catch one that we're mentioning here, just go and check it out at sherlockiancalendar.com. If you happen to be in Canada as well, the Bootmakers of Toronto. Actually, you don't have to be in Canada for this one. It's a virtual meeting. They're having a meeting on April the 5th.
Well, and then in Michigan, in East Lansing, Michigan, the Greek interpreters are having a luncheon meeting on April 5th as well. Are you going to that?
I am not, because I am going to be overseeing the meeting that evening in Warren, Michigan, for the Amateur Mendicant Society.
And then in Denver, well, you see, there's a lot going on in Michigan. And in Denver, Colorado, Dr. Watson's neglected patients will not be neglected for lunch on the 6th of April. Virtual meeting of the crew of the Bark Lone Star on April 6th. Good grief. And then the Redheaded League of Jersey in beautiful New Jersey is having a meeting on a dinner meeting on April 10 that we are looking forward to. And I'll tell you, the subject of that meeting is going to be the CBS series Watson.
Oh, that could be a lot of fun. Yeah. Let's see. What else do we have here? We've got Columbia, South Carolina. They're having a dinner meeting on April 17th, the Handsome Wheels of Columbia, South Carolina. The Norwegian Explorers are going to have their virtual study group on April the 19th. Nashville, Tennessee. See, we're all over the map here. This is lovely. Nashville, Tennessee, going to have the Nashville Scholars of the Three Pipe Problem Luncheon meeting on April 19th.
Well, and then at the end of the month, this is probably a good place to stop. April 26th in Indianapolis, you and I are going to make a rare joint appearance at the Midwest BSI Canonical Conclave, where the focus will be just scion meetings and how we can strengthen local communities and expand them. People who are interested in Sherlock Holmes. I'm really looking for that in Indianapolis.
Yeah, it's a lovely concept put together by Steve Doyle. And the idea here is that you've heard there are so many of these science societies that are having meetings all over the place. Well, when we can support each other and strengthen each other and come up with ideas and exchange structures and even how we're organized as a business, there's all kinds of things for us to talk about to help further the pursuit of Sherlockian activities into the future. And we don't have to feel as if any of us are isolated in what we do, because there is this wonderful community of Sherlockians and now of Sherlockian societies that are coming together. So we'll look forward to that. And I'm sure we'll have a report coming out of the conclave. And I hope it's not as controversial as Conclave with Rafe Fine. Which was a great movie, by the way.
White smoke. What happens if white smoke comes out of the chimney?
It'll be blue smoke. Blue, gray, and purple smoke.
Color-changing smoke. There you go. You know what that signifies in the world of Sherlock Holmes, don't you? That he was smoking with his dressing gown on again.
He fell asleep with all three dressing gowns on.
That's right.
It's A Chance of Listening with your correspondent, Madeline Quiñones.
Hello, everyone. I'm Madeline Quiñones, and today I'm here to talk about another podcast that discusses the canon story by story. This one also got started in 2019, and it's still going, albeit on an irregular schedule. It's Sherlock, From Adler to Amberley. Each episode, co-hosts Carl Kopak and John Reese invited guests to come on the show and talk about the featured story with them. Usually the guest is a Sherlockian, and they've had on Bonnie McBird, Les Klinger, the late Nicholas Hutekin, Catherine Cook, Rob Nunn, me, a couple of guys called Scott and Bert who somehow made the three students interesting. A handful of things make the show unique. One is that they focus on the short stories, hence the title, from Irene Adler in A Scandal in Bohemia to Josiah Amberley in The Retired Colorman. Another unique element is their Watson Watch, which is when they zero in on whether or not Watson does anything more in a story than take notes and follow Holmes around. Brutal, sometimes, but interesting. Also, this is actually one of the harder Sherlockian podcasts to find because it runs in the feed of a different show called Rippercast. There's been some talk of tackling the novels once they're done with the short stories, and I hope they do that. There's also a long-awaited plan to have a panel of guests, rather than one single guest, to debate upon the Mazarin and Stone. As for highlights, well, you have all the short stories from Scandal up to The Missing Three-Quarter, and an array of guests to choose from. So I really think you should just pick a story and a guest and go from there. But I will say, the extra long special episode that covers the final problem in the empty house and features both Les Klinger and Bert Coules is a lot of fun. And that's all I've got for now. The next Adler to Amberley episode should be the Abbey Grange, and I'm looking forward to it. Until then, play along at home with Watson Watch, and I'll catch you later.
Well, that was lovely, Madeline. Thank you for that reminiscence for us of From Adler to Amberley. As you say, we were happy to be guests on the show there, talking about the three students. It was a lot of fun, and you can tell those guys actually have a lot of fun regularly, which is why we're so pleased that you're involved with that as well. Well, you recognize that theme. That's right. It is Canonical Couplet, the Sherlockian quiz program where we give you 2 lines of poetry and ask you to come up with the Sherlock Holmes story that we are talking about. Now, if you were around here the last time, you may recall that we gave you this clue. Do you ken John Clay in his dark room safely hid? That's a lot more than Jabez Wilson did. Bert, here we go. I'm going to ask you, despite my better judgment, if you know what the answer to this episode's canonical couplet is.
Oh, it's a terrific case. It's one of the early adventures. It's where that poor fellow, that challenged Victor Hatherley, encounters a frozen salesman at an estate sale. It's the case Watson called The Auctioneer's Numb.
Oh, I think I'm numb after that one. As always, a valiant effort on your part, but no. We're going to have to turn to our friend Eric Deckers, as always, who helps us out, saying, I've got it. It's the story of when all the male bank robbers were off fighting in the Manipuri Rebellion of 1891. So women began dyeing their hair and robbing banks in order to keep the underground economy healthy. It's the story Watson called the Red-Headed League of Their Own. Except I've likely struck out with that guess, and it's more likely to be the Red-Headed League. I'd be upset if I didn't win, but there's no crying in Canonical Couplet.
No crying.
Well done. Good movie reference there, Eric. But you are right. It is the Red-Headed League. While you are eligible to win, I'm going to pull out the big prize wheel and give it a spin in here, see if we can determine which of the many entrants was the lucky guesser this time. And it's slowing down on number 22. I like that, 22. And that looks like it is Shayna Carter. Welcome. Glad to have your contribution here. You will be receiving a copy of The Golden Era of Sherlock Holmes and His Contemporaries by Michael Cohen. So stay tuned for that. Should also mention, among the many entries that we got here last time includes Hannah from Sweden. Always nice to see some overseas participants. So welcome, Hannah. You did get the answer right. Unfortunately, you were not chosen this time around, but keep at it. And we encourage everyone else to keep at it as well. So here's your chance. If you happen to know the answer to this canonical couplet clue, you will have a chance to win something from the vaults. I think it's something from the vaults this time around. Yeah, so here we go. We gaily watch a wicked man's disease, while Holmes and faithful Watson break the peace. If you know the answer to this episode's canonical couplet, put it in an email addressed to comment@ihearofsherlock.com with canonical couplet in the subject line. If we choose your name at random from all of the correct entries, you'll win. Good luck. All right, Bert, what do you say?
Yeah, what do you say? That's what I want to know.
I've said all I can say at this point.
Oh, you've got all those books behind you. Why don't you pull one down? There are more words there. It's full of words.
I'm afraid if I do that they're going to collapse on top of me. It's always a danger.
That's true.
For everyone listening, please shore up your bookshelves. Wasn't that from Kiss Me Kate? Shore up your bookshelves. Start reading them now.
No, you're thinking of Dinah Shore Up Your Bookshelves. And she's always driving around the United States in her Chevrolet, so who knows?
Who knows indeed. Good old Dinah Shore.
Yeah.
I hope they used a Chevy for her final resting place for her hearse. To get her to the cemetery. That would have been...
Get her to the cemetery on time. There's another musical reference.
Oh, my gosh. Well, we better get ourselves out of here on time before we get ourselves into more trouble. Until we speak again, this is the always on time Scott Monty.
And I'm closing in Boston. I'm Bert Wolder.
And together, we say...
The game's afoot.
The game's afoot.
I'm afraid that in the pleasure of this conversation, I am neglecting business of importance, which awaits me elsewhere.
Thank you for listening. Please be sure to join us again for the next episode of I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, the first podcast dedicated to Sherlock Holmes.
Goodbye, and good luck, and believe me to be, my dear fellow, very sincerely yours, Sherlock Holmes.